2005. So before getting into this section, I remember so vividly seeing Lisa Bossner, I believe, stepped in Lettuce and Lovage. I believe Mary Beth Hurt was supposed to be in that show, and Lisa ended up having to step in because Mary Beth Hurt was not able to do the part for some reason. And so Lisa on opening night, and she's one of those, Lisa Bossner, who's a company member at the Players, is one of those profoundly dynamic, amazing actors, because she has this capacity to jump in with authority in any part that she's playing. And that play is so challenging. It's hilarious. And the comedic elements to that play are so wonderful. And her and Dale playing opposite each other in that show. And Lisa was still holding the script. And I'll never forget it, because it was as if it melted away. It was like, there've been a couple times in my life where I've sat and watched actors work where I've been like, what just happened? Like, you really are watching like a magic trick happen on stage. And that was one of those instances where Lisa's natural, innate kind of grace and elegance just became this person. And it was like the script melted away, and it was seamless. It was seamless. And I remember as I'm thinking about it, I kind of am getting goose flesh, because I remember just being like, wow, that lady's something special. Like, that woman is a really special actor. And then that would just be reaffirmed time and time again in anything I ever watched her in. But that was one of my first times of seeing her on stage, and it was the opening night of Lettuce and Lovage. And I believe my father and my grandfather had just kind of started rehearsal on Inherit the Wind, which was going to open next.
Started rehearsal that day or the day before. And it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. I mean, there's some magical stalwarts at that theater that have been there long before I got there, and even before the old man got there. And Craig and Michael Page and Lisa, and I mean, there's some extraordinary people that are in that theater. Miss Decker, Dale Hodge. My God, these are magical. These are like they're like magicians, like shamans of theater. They're fantastic.
Really gifted.
Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, really, really gifted. But anyway, I just wanted to share that because it popped into my mind, because I remember so vividly seeing that show. James Whitmore's appearance in the 2005 production of Inherit the Wind was a memorable event. He played Matthew Brady, the populist, Bible-toting politician evangelist, while his son, James Whitmore Jr., that guy, a veteran TV director, was cast opposite him as Henry Drummond, who defended the school teacher fired for teaching evolution in the play based on the famous Scopes monkey trial. The opportunity for audiences to watch father and son battle it out on stage made for a thrilling evening of theater. Local actor Tim Clark had a front row seat as the prosecuting attorney. I sat right between the two Whitmores for most of the play, and it was like watching a Wimbledon championship. My head was swiveling back and forth between two great performances.
Yeah, that was a hell of a job. It was a hell of a job to have. I mean, the truth is, I guess we have time to talk about this sort of thing. I was in a stage in my life where I was in some therapeutic stuff that I had to work out as a human being. And one of the necessities of that, according to the people I was working with, was to go to my dad and make some amends and ask him, make some amends for some of the behaviors I'd had in my life and some of the things that I'd done that I wasn't happy about. But I asked him afterwards, I was supposed to ask him, what can I do to make this right? What can I do to make this better between you and I? And the first thing he said was, why don't we go do some plays together? And I guess he got in touch with Gus, and Gus, I'm sure hesitantly said, well, we'll see what we can do. And the old man gave me the wonderful part of Drummond in Inherit the Wind, which is the extraordinary part. And we showed up together and tried to do this thing. And Gus and the company was absolutely patient and kind and allowed me and my dad to be together as father and son. This is 2005 when this happened. My pop passed away in 2009. So you guys, it was an extraordinary gift to me to be able to spend that time with my pop. It was a great gift that the Peterborough Players not only gave me my life as a kid, being born there, but it gave me a new lease on life with my father at the end of his life. And it was I don't know if this is interesting to anybody, but man, it meant a hell of a lot to me. And I think to my whole family. Anyway, here we go. Solidarity, another world premiere. This one written by artistic director Gus Kekkonen, featured in 2005. Warren Hammock made his acting debut at the Players and was in a long line of fine character actors that have appeared on the Stearns Farm boards and remains a favorite among theater goers. And in the second company production of Little Women was immensely successful, drawing large audiences of children as well as adults to his performances. The Players came away from the New Hampshire Theater Awards with 8 more winners, including Best Drama for Inherit the Wind and Best Musical for You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. For the third year in a row, Whitmore won an acting award, but this time it was James Whitmore Jr. won Inherit the Wind. Can you imagine that? Anyway, it's pretty cool.
2006. I just want to say one thing too, in relationship to the second company, because for the first full season I spent with the Players, from start to finish, I was there as a stage manager, and I was the second company primary PSM, and then ASM to the main stage. And the first production by the second company that I saw, I believe, was Jack and the Beanstalk in the year prior to 2006. And I remember being, again, kind of stultified by how emotionally affected I was by the second company production of Jack and the Beanstalk. There's something really unique, and there's a level of sincerity and a level of earnestness and a level of a surrender to something really sweet and not cloying in any way, but really genuinely sweet and heartfelt in all of the work of the Players Theater. But the second company productions have it in this really sublime, supremely executed way. And I remember watching the production of Jack the Beanstalk, and I believe Keith Stevens directed it. I believe, I could be mistaken, but I think Keith Stevens directed it. And I was just bawling at the end of it because the moral of the story in this production was, as children, we just need to grow. We need to be given a chance to be supported and to grow. And it came, I don't know, for whatever reason, that message never resonated as clearly for me in that fairy tale as it did when I saw that second company production. And it hit me in a whole different way. And it was a story I had heard a million times before, but the elegance and the beauty and just kind of the magic connected to how productions are done there. I remember being so utterly moved by that production, and then getting to go on in 2009 and getting to be the PSM for Siobhan Martin's Just So Stories, and then Gus Kokonen's adaptation of Anne of Green Gables, both equally touching and moving in a way that you don't expect to be moved by stories you've heard so many times. The second company too does exceptional work, and the interns that comprise the second company, they work so unbelievably hard. They're worked. It's like Blast of the Traveling Circus. And then they go on stage and perform and do these amazing, amazing productions as actors and actresses. The second company at the theater is exceptional. After the close of the 2005 season, there was an abnormally high level of activity occurring at the Stearns Farm in what otherwise is a typically quiet period for the staff. The east end of the barn, containing the stage along with the set shop, was being demolished as part of an extensive 8-month-long renovation project. Fundraising for the project had started more than a year and a half prior to the October 2005 groundbreaking. With the initiation of a major gift initiative, MGI Capital Campaign, the ambitious goal of the campaign was to raise an astonishing $1 million by the summer of 2005.
This unprecedented level of fundraising and the imposing scope and scale of the renovation project, which seen by many as a necessary step in the continuing evolution of the Players' capabilities, also had its detractors. A feasibility study had been conducted as early as 2001 and presented to the board of trustees for discussion. At that time, some board members and staff simply couldn't foresee how such a large amount of money could be raised in order to finance the project. There was also skepticism as to how such an extensive construction project could be completed over the fall and the winter in time for the opening of the season. Closing the theater during the summer months to allow time for construction work was not a viable option. Board President Bob Pettigrew was a key advocate of the renovation project and personally led the effort to sell the ambitious goals of the MGI, along with the expertise of hired fundraising consultant Sam Lewis. Bob and his wife, Hope, both had a long history of volunteering with the theater, from parking cars during performances to both serving terms as president of the board of trustees. However, Bob's real expertise is marketing and fundraising. He and Sam made several compelling presentations outlining the MGI plans to the board in the spring of 2004, helping persuade them to move forward with the initiative. Sam and Bob organized in-house cocktail party presentations throughout the summer of 2004 to promote the value of the stage, building renovations to potential benefactors. Gus and Keith were present to stress the importance of the renovations for the future growth and viability of the theater. A cocktail party was held in October of 2004 that featured former New Hampshire Governor Walter Peterson and James Whitmore, the latter having traveled to Peterborough for the express purpose of explaining the worth of the project to potential donors. This effectively closed out the quiet phase of the MGI and subsequently kicked off the active phase. At that point, well over half of the $1 million goal had been pledged by September of 2005. The MGI efforts had exceeded that goal, raising over $1.1 million. It was an amazing feat, one that reflected the hard work of everyone involved and an indication of the strong support the players enjoyed in the community. Architect Rick Monahan, who had designed the previous renovations to the barn, went back to his drawing board, and with much input from Gus and Keith and Macmillan Construction Management Company of Keene, New Hampshire, brought the plans to life. David Stevenson once again provided the crew and expertise required to install the authentic post and beam structural members over the expanded house seating area. When the project was finally completed in early June 2006, the players had a new 30-foot tall fly tower in place, complete with cable rigging equipment that allowed sets and lights to be raised and lowered in and out of the audience viewing area. A partial basement was constructed under the new stage, allowing space for a small orchestra pit and up to 3 trapdoor entrance exit points to the stage. The new stage was 46 feet wide and 23 feet deep, a significant increase in area compared with the old stage. The expanded front of the house area allowed room for 3 additional rows of seats, increasing the total capacity of the theater to 248 seats. A new heating and cooling system was installed for the house and stage interior, and parking space for 20 additional vehicles was cleared from the small, unused woodlot across from the rehearsal hall and offices. The players wasted no time putting their new technology to use. Sets flew in and out from the grid far above the stage. The characters puffed in and out of the traps. The trap provided a solution to one of the most ticklish problems in Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale: what to do with the famous stage direction, exit pursued by a bear. In this case, director Janet Tiff originally intended to costume a 6'7" intern as the bear and have him drag the actor playing Antigonus down the trap. However, it turned out that the trap wasn't big enough for both actors, so the bear was turned into a giant puppet that rose ominously out of the trap, then withdrew with Antigonus screaming, apparently pulled in after it. In 2006 season reunited James Whitmore and his son, James Whitmore Jr. I'm reading all this stuff, but back to the thought that I was mentioning before. These are the last 4 years of my pop's life. Tuesdays with Maury is an interesting play. It was an extraordinary experience for me to be able to act with my pop in a play where he was losing his life. I was on stage, just he and I was able to, the thing that I'll always remember is I was able night in and night out to look at my old man and tell him I loved him in public for the world to see. And the thing about my dad I should mention is that he was a rough guy, and he was a tough guy, and he didn't stand a whole lot of BS. But the one place he was the kindest and the gentlest and the most giving and the most empathetic was with the actors he worked with on the stage. He was extremely generous to anybody who worked with him on the stage.
He was really protective.
Yeah. And to be on stage with my dad was really to feel safe as an actor. And I loved that experience. I will always be grateful to the players. I will always be grateful to Gus. and the group there and Craig for letting me work with my dad on that piece. I was completely wrong for the part. I was an old, haggard TV director playing a young reporter, dyed my hair when I went through a crisis about dyed hair for a few years. But the reality was, it was such a gift to be able to be with my pop in that play. And 2 years later, gone. So I will always be deeply grateful to the theater, and I will, I'll always be deeply grateful to the theater. Thanks. The 2006 season reunited James Whitmore with his son, James Whitmore Jr., and Mitch Albom's the dramatization of the best-selling book, Tuesdays with Morrie. They really work a special kind of magic, wrote Seth Chatfield in his transcript review. Blending humor with a tale of a man's slow descent towards death, it's a powerhouse, which might be the motivation behind the standing ovation given by the crowd. At the annual New Hampshire Theater Awards, the most honored play of the season was Hobson's Choice, earning Best Actor for Michael Page, Best Actor for Dee Nelson, another extraordinary actress, and Best Supporting Actor for Craig Schwartz, who seems to get an award every year. Anyway, that's the end of our stuff here. That's the end of this chapter. Thank you for letting me participate.
Well, there's one other thing I did want to say. So this doesn't go as far as the last season that my grandfather spent in New Hampshire was 2008, right? Or 2007.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
2008.
2008, right? So I went back and I was just me there with him and Noreen in a house, I think by Flanders Pond. And I stayed with them. And just kind of to buttress what my dad just mentioned about, but my grandfather as an entity in life was an intense person. I mean, as an actor, he was profoundly skilled and profoundly intense and intimidating. And in life, he kind of was like that too. And so for a grandkid, there was a level of proximity that wasn't necessarily easy to access with him. And the summer that he went back to do Our Town, the last production he did on the stage in Peterborough was Our Town. And he played the stage manager. And he had just had a hip replacement that didn't go well, and he was in a lot of pain. And it was a moment where I got a couple major things fulfilled for me as a human being. One, I really got to witness what a soldier my grandfather was. That no matter what he was experiencing physically, he was going to do the show. And that he made a commitment to do the show and carry it all the way, and that nothing was going to get in the way of that. And I watched my gramps like really struggling with some really intense physical pain, and in the later act of his life, and watched him push through his physical experience to get on that stage and play the stage manager. And he used a cane, and it somehow became an element of the character that I don't know how you ever watched it without the stage manager having a cane ever before. And there was a level of depth or a level of connection to every line he uttered. And I didn't know at that point that this was going to be the last show that he did. I didn't know. I don't think he did. I don't think anybody did. But it was irrefutable that there was a level of depth to what he did in that role that could have just been the byproduct of him trying to push through the physical pain to remember his lines. I don't know, but it was galvanizing. And the other thing that emerged on that trip was that I got this really beautiful, intimate time with my grandfather, where I was just staying in a house with he and Noreen, and I was able to do things like help prepare meals for him and do laundry, like get the car filled up with gas, get the car, like just do things for my grandfather as his grandkid. And I feel like for me as a grandchild, it's fulfilling to be able to do that. And there was a level of intimacy that I was able to have with him during that production. I attribute it to the theater and to Peterborough and to that place being a landing strip or a home base or whatever for my grandfather. And that it was really a blessing to watch him return to that stage to play the stage manager in our town in Peterborough, where Thornton Wilder wrote the play about Peterborough, and he is kind of the omniscient voice of God in this play. And it felt like something came full circle. It was so powerful. And I wanted to mention that because that was, I mean, every experience I've had at the Players has touched me and made me want to remain connected and to be part of this legacy. But that experience galvanized me. It was a really intensely, emotionally meaningful and creatively meaningful moment in my life. So I just wanted to share that.
Speaking of full circle, when my pop was, not to be, maudlin or morbid, but when he was very sick and on the last months of his life, he was on chemotherapy and he never slept. And we sat up at night, and one night we asked him, what was the greatest day of your life, Pop? And he said, the day we beat Williamsville high school football team. His football team beat Williamsville, and it was the greatest day of his life. He was I think a sophomore in high school, and they beat this rival team they hadn't beaten in 15 years. And that was the greatest day of his life. So why don't you tell him the story of what you did with his ashes when you and Jake headed back to Peterborough for the final year when we did the memorial for Dad at the theater?
Right. So after he passed away, and I will say this too, that when he got the cancer diagnosis, one of the first things he said was, I can't die. I'm supposed to do a play this summer. That his connection to coming back to the theater was his reason to stay alive in a major way. But when he passed away and he was cremated, and my brother Jacob and I drove across the country with his ashes, and we sprinkled some of his ashes in the end zone on his high school football field.
Amherst Central High in Buffalo, New York.
It was the strangest experience. Kind of like, I mean, my brother and I, who probably look pretty out of place in on a high school football field in Amherst, and went down to the football field and went in the end zone and sat down, and we each had handfuls of my grandfather's ashes, and we sat there for a little bit and we said a little prayer, and then kind of pulled up some of the dirt and put his ashes in the end zone, in the dirt of the end zone, and then patted it down with grass. I mean, conscious of the fact that, that'll probably get moved and kicked, but it was just the gesture of, we wanted him to be in a place that he held one of the greatest memories of his life. And so some of his ashes were put in the end zone, and then his remaining ashes are in an urn and in a box in the rafters in the theater, in the house. It felt like the most natural place that he would be resting, would be watching that stage and watching the shows happening in the Peterborough Playhouse, and that he is a eternal audience member. He's an eternal energy in that space. And when I got a chance to be in a show, it was very much so that feeling of, I'm here, Grandpa. I get to do a show here. That was another layer of the full circle, was finally getting to have an opportunity to act on that stage. And my grandfather's in the rafters, and my parents came, and my husband was there with my two children, and my littlest son was, as a toddler, was running around the theater while I was in rehearsal. And it just felt like this continuum of a life force or a legacy in this place that's really so meaningful to me and my family, and that this art specifically is really important. And that in the face of the COVID experience and what is happening with this pandemic, I hold it with the highest intention that we figure out a way to keep the living theater happening in the Peterborough Playhouse, because it's one of the most important places in the world to me. So, and I feel like my whole family, but that's that.
Thank you for listening to our blabber.
Thanks for the blabber, audience. And thank you for asking us, and thank you for letting us be part of this community of the Playhouse. And thanks, Dad.
Thank you.
All
Love
right.
you.
Love you too, Pop. Okay.